Hi, my name is Vivien Jovet. I'm the team lead for Coder Studio development team at Toro. In this video, we are going to create our very first REST API using Toro Integrate and Coder Studio. We are going to take the code first approach, meaning that we are going to implement the logic of our API first and then expose it as a REST API. If you're interested in the design first approach, we have a video covering that as well on our channel. Alright, so let's get started. For this tutorial, we are going to create a very simple CRUD API. We are going to make a movie API, so we'll be able to query the movies, add the movie, and delete them as well. So you can see that I already have an integrate package that is set up here. I also created data source for the movies. And over here in my integrate package, I have done as well the SQL service that are reading and writing to the database. So I won't be covering those in this video. We also have a video that is covering everything about databases. Okay, so we have already our service to read and write to the database. We have our group model here that defines our movie. So with an ID, a title, language, release date, and runtime. And what we want to do now is we want to expose it as a REST API. Alright, so I'm going to right click on that API package here, and we are going to create REST API. So you can right click and do new and then group API, or you can also press the command N shortcut and then search REST, and then you'll find the group API wizard as well. Now I'm going to click next. Then we're going to publish an API. Next. Then I'm going to call it movie API. Make sure you have the type that is set to REST API and click finish. Alright. First, we're going to take a look at the general tab. So in the general tab, you can give some information about your API, like for example, the title, my movie API. Then you can give it a description, and the nice thing is that you can use Markdown in there. There, you can see the preview there. Then you get a bunch of other fields. One of the required field is the license name, so we're going to use the GPL 3.0 for that. And that's all for that general tab. Now let's take a look at the documentation. So for the documentation, that's where you give the URL for the detailed documentation about each operation. So to keep it simple, we're just going to use the Toro Cloud website. Alright, so that's done for the documentation and information. Now let's take a look at the operation. So to add operation, first you need to define a path. So that's where the operation will be accessible. For adding on a path, I can press the add path button here, or I can press the dot key to trigger content assist and select path. Our first path is going to be to retrieve all the movies, so I'm going to call it /movies. And for the base path here, I'm going to change it to be movie DB. Alright, so now we want to add a get operation to that path. What I can do is right click, new operation, and get. But I can also do it via content assist by pressing dot and then selecting get. So now I am on the service node of that get operation, and I can either select an existing service or create a new one. So in our case, we don't have a service yet, so we're going to create a new one. So we're going to name it get movies and press finish. So now we need to give it a response. So to add a response, I can right click, new response, or I can also use content assist, pressing dot, response, and then we're going to use the default response. And again, we can add a property. So I'm going to add our movie model that I showed earlier, and I'm going to rename that to movies. Alright. You can see here I have a warning because it's requiring me to give it a description. So I'm gonna give it a description here, all the movies. So now warning is gone. So now we have a service with movies as a response, but we don't have the logic for getting the movies. So that's what we're gonna do now. So to go to my service, one of the nice things you can do from the REST API editor is you can either right click and do open declaration or use the command enter shortcut. So that will take me to my service here, and you can see that I already have my movie as an output, but I have no step in there. So first thing I'm going to do is convert that movie model to an array. So I'm going to do convert to, and then array. So you can see now that the icon changed here, so it's an array now. And next thing we want to do is get the movies in the database and then output them in our movies array here. So to do that, I'm gonna take the get movies over here and drop it. Now I'm gonna do the mapping for that invoke step. And to go to the mapper, I can either click on the tab here, but I can also double click on the step and it's gonna activate it for me. So it doesn't have any input, so that's fine. It has an output, which is a cursor. And over here, you can see that properties name differs, so we cannot map it directly. So what we're going to do is map that to a declared variable or declared property. To do it, I can either use the menu here, declare property and map, or what I can do also is drag it and then press Alt on macOS to declare it and drop it. So I'm going to rename that to movie cursor there. And then what we want to do next is map each record in the database to our movie array. So for that, I'm going to use content assist as well. So .key, and then I'm going to search iterate over array. Our input array is going to be the movie cursor, and our output array is going to be the movies array. So once I have that, I'm going to create a map step under it, and then we're going to simply map the cursor to the movies array. I'm going to do that here, title to title, language, and runtime. So there we go. So I'm going to save that, close the service. I'm going to save my Move API. And now let's see if we can access this operation. So to test it, I'm going to use the HTTP client. So I can open it by clicking the double arrow icon on the main toolbar. And I'm going to simply select the operation and drag it into the HTTP client. So now I have my request that is set up, and I'm going to just send it and take a look at the response. So you can see that my response has the proper JSON response with all the movies that are in the database. So the next operation that we want to add is the getting a movie using its ID. So find the movie by its ID. So for that, we're gonna need a new path that's gonna be /movie/ and then we're gonna use path parameter. And to do path parameter, you need to use the curly brace, the name of the parameter, and close the curly brace. All right, so now we need an operation again. So it's gonna be a get operation as well. We need to create a new service for it. So it's gonna be find movie by ID. There. Next, what we want to do is add this parameter over here. So I'm gonna do path parameter, path, and then add the property. So it's gonna be an integer, and we're gonna name it ID. Next, we want two response. So we want a response with the movie, and we want a response for when the movie is not found. So let's first do the OK response, so the 200. We're gonna add a property which is going to be the movie. So that's, again, we are using the model that I showed earlier. The name is fine. I'm gonna give it a description. Movie with .id. Alright, so next is the 404 response. I'm gonna select 404 here. And for this one, we're just gonna simply use a string with message. So I'm gonna call that not found. Again, description, movie not found. Alright, the next step, should not forget that is to add the response config, because we have two different response, so we need to be able to tell which is going to be used. So for that, I'm going to simply add an integer property to it. Alright, so now let's go to our service. So I'm going to select the service node again and command enter to go to it. For the ID property here, I'm going to give it some validation. So I want the minimum to be 0, so I don't want any negative number. And for the response code, the default is going to be 200. Alright, so now we want to fetch that movie using its ID. So you see that here I already have an SQL service, and another way to add it is by using content assist, and I can type find movie by ID, and you can see that here I have my SQL service. I'm going to select that. Again, we're going to the mapper, and we're going to simply map the ID to the input of the SQL service. And then here, similarly to the other get movies, we're going to map each property to the movie response. Alright. Now that's fine. If the service return a movie, then it's going to do the mapping here. But if there is no movie with that ID, I'm going to get an empty movie model here. So that's what I want to check to be able to say if the movie is not found. So to do so, I'm going to use a fork step, pressing that key. Then I'm going to search fork true false. For the true step, I'm going to use a map step, and then we're not going to use false step. So I'm going to just press escape here to cancel. And then I'm going to right click and edit the expression. And then I'm going to say movie dot. Now you can see I have content assist, and I'm going to search for is null. So if is null value return true, it means that none of the property of that model have a value that is set. So if that's true, it means that the movie is not found. Alright, so now I'm going to click on my map step here. So if the model is null, then I want the response code to be 404. And I want the message to be no movie with ID. And then I'm going to use the groovy string, so I can use a variable in there. And then going to be found. So it's going to basically say no movie with ID 123 found. And then I'm going to press enter. So now we have our set expression here. And that should be all. So now we can save the service, go back to our movie API, save it as well. And we're gonna try it again. So now I'm gonna select that other get operation, drag it in here. And we're gonna try it. So I know that there is a movie with ID 1. So let's try that first. And let's send it. So you can see it find the movie that I wanted. Let's try with a random ID. That work, 404. There is no movie with that ID. Then let's try to put an invalid ID, like for example, -1. And you're gonna see here that it's telling me that the ID cannot be -1. The value must be superior to 0. Alright, let's put back that to 1. Alright, next one is adding a movie. So for that, we're gonna need another path again. It's gonna be /movie. And then to that, we're going to add a post operation. We're gonna need a new service. I'm gonna call it add movie, for example. Press finish. It's gonna have a body parameter. The body parameter is gonna be the movie itself. So I'm gonna select our movie model again, and that's fine. And then we want the response. So the response is simply gonna be the default response, which is gonna be just a message. So I'm gonna use a string property here and name it success. Alright, so now the description is gonna be the movie was added. Alright, now again, I'm going to my service here, press Command Enter. We have the movie over here and our output with the message. So what we want to do is insert the movie. So I'm going to press Content Assist and then insert movie over here. And then again, same thing, we're going to map the input to my movie. The ID is not required here. So I'm going to use the title, the language, release date, and the runtime. Alright. For the message, we're going to set a default value. That's going to be movie added successfully. And I'm going to save it. So now let's go back to our API. So we have our body parameter here, our response. We're going to save that. And again, I'm going to test it in the HTTP client. I'm going to drag that over here. And I'm going to compose my JSON body here. using our movie here. So I'm going to copy that as JSON, and we're going back to the HTTP client and pasting it here. So now I'm going to scrap out the ID. The title is going to be testing post operation. Language is English. Release date, let's make that 2018 0101, time 2 hours. Alright, so now let's send that request, and you can see I get a message that says that the movie was added successfully. And now let's check if I can see it when I retrieve all the movies. So let's scroll down to the bottom over here. There, so you can see that my movie was added here, and I also can get it by its ID. There, send that, and I get the movie that I just added. So the last operation now that we want is the delete operation. So for this one, we can actually reuse the /movie/ID path because we want to delete it by its ID. So I can just add a delete operation here. We're going to create a new service. It's going to be delete movie. We are going to use toResponse again. So the first one is going to be for 200 when the response, or when the movie was deleted, basically. We're going to add a property that's going to be the message. And then a description is going to be movie deleted. Next, we want the 404 response. Sorry, there, 404 response. And then we're going to use, we can reuse the property that we already created, and we don't want any header. Then I'm going to set the description, movie not deleted. Alright, so you can see I still have an error here because I didn't add the path parameter, so we're gonna do that last. Parameter, path, add property, and then it's gonna be, no, not a string, sorry. Should be integer. Oops. Alright, integer there, and I'm gonna name that ID. So we can delete this one and save that. So now again, we're going to go to our service, and I'm going to delete this one here because I don't need it anymore. We're going to use the delete movie service here, the SQL service, drop it in there. Then we just need to do the mapping. And there, map the ID to the ID. And then we are going to use the update count. So again, I'm just gonna declare it here. So we're gonna use the update count to know if something was deleted. And to check that, we're gonna use a fork step again. And we're gonna use the fork true false. For the true, we're gonna use a map. For the false, we're gonna use map again. And then for the expression, it's going to be update count is superior to 0. So it means that if you deleted at least one record, then we're good. So for the true one, we're going to set the message to simply movie successfully deleted. Oops. And then for the false, so if it didn't delete anything, we're going to use a groovy string again to give it a nice message, and it's gonna be no movie with ID found. Alright. So now let's save that again. And let's delete operation. So I'm gonna drag that in the HTTP client. There it is. So I have my parameter here. So let's give it an ID that we know. So for example, the 1041. Let's send the request. Then you see here it was deleted successfully. So if I was to send it again, I should get 404 response. except that I forgot to set the response code field. So I'm going to add that now. So you should not forget about that. So I'm going to add it here. Go to my service and correct my mistake. So if it's true here, we just, not this one. We need to set it to 200. And then if it's false, then we need to set it to 404. Alright. So let's save both. And let's go back to our HTTP client. And now when I delete it, I should get 404. So that's what I get here. No movie with ID 1041 is found. Alright, so as you can see, we have a complete CRUD API here that we created. And the great thing about it is that out of the box, it's generating for you the Swagger and OpenAPI compliance schema. So you can see that in the preview tab here, I have my Swagger in YAML or JSON format. I have my OpenAPI, and you can see that all your operations are here. So we have the get movies, we have the find movie by ID, and you can see that, for example, here the ID that we set to have a minimum of 0. So everything is translated to that OpenAPI schema, and your description as well and everything. For example, give that link to someone, and then you can use your OpenAPI schema. And if you want people to try out your API, there's a nice way to do it is by using the API Explorer. So the API Explorer is exposed publicly on your instance, and you can access it in Coder Studio as well, either via the menu here, OpenAPI Explorer. Another nice way to do it is by clicking this OpenAPI Explorer. So once it is open, I have my movie API here, and I can click on my operations. So I can, for example, try out the movies. You can see here I get the response. We can get movies by ID, and you can see that all your description are also there, and also the validations. For example, I cannot send a -1 ID here. So let's try the 1. And you can see I get a response. So you can give the link of the API Explorer to the customer of your API, and then they can discover it and try it out. So that's all for this video, and thank you for watching.